So thank you very much for inviting us to this meeting. It's a pleasure to be here, also me and my colleague Kirsten. So we are both working in the unit dealing with animal welfare in DG Santé, so in the European Commission, and we will focus today mainly on the revision of the EU animal welfare legislation, and also mention some other activities that the Commission is carrying out in the area of animal welfare. So I will start. Just a reminder, in case not all of you are completely familiar with the existing EU animal welfare legislation. So we have at present 5 directives and 2 regulations, which are all based on actually the agricultural article of the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union, which has to take into account Article 13 of the treaty that is recognizing animals as being sentient beings. So the 5 directives are, first of all, a directive, a horizontal directive dealing with the protection of all animals at farm level. It's Directive 98/58. And then we have vertical directives dealing with specific species, laying hens, cows, pigs, and chickens for meat production. And then we have, separately from that, 2 regulations, one on animal transport and one on the killing and slaughter, on protection of welfare at the time of killing and slaughter of animals. So that's basically the scope that we are looking at. I know that on the ground, you are probably subject to additional layers of requirements coming from maybe the national level, regional level, or from basically operators further down the chain. But just to say that here we are talking about this scope of EU acquis. So basically, the Commission now is working on a major project which is called the Green Deal. And as part of the Green Deal, we have the Farm to Fork strategy, which is a strategy to try to make the food chain more sustainable. As part of this sustainability objective, you have an objective to work on animal welfare. You see here on the screen some quotes from this Farm to Fork strategy that was adopted in May 2020. Notably, the concept that better animal welfare improves animal health and food quality, reduces the need for medication, and can help to preserve biodiversity. And the main commitment that is in this strategic document is a commitment from the Commission to put forward legislative proposals to revise the animal welfare legislation, including the legislation on transport and slaughter, in order to align it with the latest scientific evidence, to broaden its scope, to make it easier to enforce, and ultimately to ensure a higher level of animal welfare. So this is what is in the text of the strategy. And then in the annex to this strategy, you see basically a table with a certain timeline. And for this specific revision, the timeline is at the very end of 2023, which means that at the very end of 2023, the Commission will put forward its legislative proposals, which then will have to be examined by the European Parliament and the Council in legislative procedure. So it will take some time before the final text is agreed. So it will be later than 2023. And then there is, of course, a delay before the entry into force of the legislation, and there will certainly be a number of transition periods before certain requirements enter into application. So that's some element. And what is not in the slide is that the Farm to Fork strategy also has some wording on animal welfare labeling, namely that the Commission will explore options for animal welfare labeling as a way to promote basically a better transmission through the chain of, let's say, rewards for efforts to improve animal welfare. So this is also part of our package, and I will show you that we deal also with labeling when we look at all the current acquis. So the first step in this project is to carry out what we call a fitness check. So it's actually an evaluation, but an evaluation of a set of rules. As you see, we don't have just one legal text, we have a set of legal rules, so we call it a fitness check, but it's basically an evaluation. And this follows the principles of better regulation. So we have to look at different criteria that you see here on the screen: relevance, coherence, efficiency, effectiveness, and EU added value. These are the let's say, better regulation criteria for carrying out an evaluation. And to do this, we are doing this mainly in-house, but also with some help of a university. And we do a desk study. There are lots and lots of reports, materials, scientific articles that are relevant to evaluate these questions, and field studies. So we have done some interviews with stakeholders. We have collected a number of, we have done a survey with the EU Animal Welfare Platform. We have collected a number of data. So this is, let's say, a more field exercise. And I would not go into all the details of the process, but just to give you a flavor of what we have found so far. So far, we observed that there seems to be a lack of clarity of certain provisions of this EU animal welfare acquis, a lack of specific, updated, and detailed requirements, some issues around the use of directives to protect animals at farm level, a lack of tools to monitor, measure, and report, a lack of training and competencies in certain areas, and an insufficient and uneven information to consumers. So these are the preliminary results. Now we are trying to finalize this exercise. We received lots of inputs. We have, as I said, the university helping us for the cost-benefit analysis. And we will try to finalize it by the middle of this year. So around this summer, we hope to publish the outcome of this fitness check. Now, we are working in what we call in our jargon in a back-to-back approach, meaning that we are, based on the preliminary results, we have already started to work on the impact assessment, which is the next step in the better regulation cycle in order to prepare a legislative proposal. So the impact assessment is basically the idea that before putting forward a legislative proposal, you have to assess all the impacts in terms of environmental impact, economic impact, social impact of major changes that you foresee in your legislative proposal. And the first step of this impact assessment is what we call, again in our jargon, inception impact assessment. So it's a document which is really kickstarting the process by presenting in, I think it's something like 8 pages in our case, the context, the problems observed so far, the envisaged policy options, or let's say the policy options that we envisage to assess in our impact assessment, and the expected impact. So it's not a conclusive assessment of the impact, it's just from the start, a priori, what we would expect to be the impacts of the different policy options that are mentioned in the document. And this document was published last July and open for a period of feedback, so the public could comment on it. We received almost 1,000 contributions with a lot of material, many papers, because it was made, open consultation, so people could submit documents. So we have a really rich material to digest and useful feedback. So that was done, and based on this, we have a bit refined the policy options, and we are in the process of basically starting the studies themselves. We will have several studies, one on transport, one on labeling, one on slaughter, and one on farm welfare. And basically, so this feedback process helped us to basically design these studies. The following step is that we have launched an open public consultation. You have here the web link, which is still running. So you have, I think, until the beginning of this week. Yes, it's in a few days to still contribute if you haven't done so. So it's really this is a bit different format of consultation because it's a questionnaire. So we have prepared questions, And then you have at the end an open box to submit some additional comments. But of course, if you want to send additional data or papers, our door is open in general. It's not like this open public consultation is the only and final way to consult, but it will of course be very useful for us to basically have an idea of the reaction of the public in general on certain policy options that were listed in this inception impact assessment. And we will also analyze the comments, but so far I think we have already received something like 20,000 replies. So you can imagine that with 20,000 replies, I'm not able to tell you what the free text contributions contain. This will require time to digest, but we will, I think, we have 8 weeks after the closure to prepare a sort of summary of the contributions we have received. So we will focus the summary on the, let's say, questions, not the open text, but the questions, which the QCM, and this will be made public, so you will get an idea of what was the reaction we got in this step. Voila. And now another element that is important to add to this picture is the European Citizens Initiative and the Cage Age. So in 2020, the Commission formally received European Citizens Initiative asking to prohibit the use of cages for certain farm animals. And I don't know if you are very aware of this mechanism, but there are very strict thresholds to be met to qualify as to meet the criteria of a European Citizens Initiative that is requiring the Commission to reply. So they managed to reach this criteria because they gathered 1.3 million signatures in, I forgot how many member states, but above the threshold. And therefore, this triggers an obligation for the Commission to reply to the request. And the request is a request for the Commission to basically adopt a legislative proposal. So the species covered by the request were laying hens, sows, calves, rabbits, pullets, broiler breeders, layer breeders, quail, ducks, and geese. And in its reply, which was adopted in July last year, the Commission basically committed to put forward a legislative proposal by the end of 2023 to phase out and finally prohibit the use of cages in all of these species and categories of animals. And of course, this will be part of the revision that we just discussed. So this is fully integrated in all the steps that I described so far. And the communication also explained that this would be a major change, and that there will be a number of elements to accompany this change. In particular, we will examine how long the transition period should be, and basically what other accompanying measures have to be put in place to support the farmers in this transition. And also how to deal with the, let's say, trade dimension, how to deal with the fact that current EU welfare rules are in most cases not applicable at importing to the EU. So for this, we have a series of EFSA opinions ongoing. I will come back to this later in the presentation. Our impact assessment will be key to determine all these elements, and the public consultation also will help us to prepare a little bit the broader picture of this major project. So now we go to these EFSA opinions that I was mentioning. In order to ensure that our legislative proposal is based on the most updated scientific evidence, we have sent a series of mandates to EFSA, the European Food Safety Authority, which is basically our scientific body based on which we develop our legislation. So we have, you have here all the topics and deadlines for EFSA to reply. So you see that the first opinions that will be adopted, or that are expected to be adopted, that will be on transport and pigs in June this year. Then we will have broilers and laying hens in December, then calves, ducks, geese, and quails, and dairy cows in March next year. Voilà. And for information, you see in the little footnote that we had already in the recent past mandates on rabbits and on the welfare slaughter, which is why they are not included in this list. And also the fact that the mandate on laying hens also addresses broiler breeders, pullets, and layer breeders. So here is a summary a bit of the timeline. I think I said all of it, but you have all on one line. So the inception impact assessment with the feedback, the public consultation. Yes, the stakeholder conference we had on 9th of December. I think some of you attended at this conference, which was very fruitful and useful for us. Then the different EFSA opinion, the conclusion of the fitness check mid this year, and the impact assessment to be concluded in the first half of 2023, so that we can adopt our legislative proposal at the latest by the end of 2023. So here I listed a bit the policy options that are listed in the inception impact assessment. This is of course a non-conclusive list because it's basically what we had made public, and in the meantime we have received this feedback. We had all these steps that help to fine-tune a little bit, but it gives the broad picture. So for transport, we will look at options to update space allowances, travel times, and travel conditions, to address the question of live animal exports to non-EU countries, the issue of unweaned and other vulnerable animals, some options to have better monitoring and enforcement by introducing new technologies, and options related to the means of transport, which would need to be adapted to new technologies. If we look at the farm level policy options, well, there were options on introducing in the legislation the objectives of the 5 domains for animal welfare, an obligation of duty of care for the farmers, the prohibition on cages, stalls, and pens that we discussed, some options for requirements for livestock farming system. So as you saw, we have this EFSA mandate on dairy cows, and where we don't have yet specific requirements for dairy cows. So this could be something that could be developed. Then increased space allowances, mutilations, imports of animal and products of animal origin. The issue I mentioned that at present, let's say, all the legislation that is for the welfare at farm level is not applicable for import of products into the EU. Some options related to fur animals, to animal welfare indicators, to more precise terminology, definitions and requirements, the issue of competence of animal handlers, and options related to new species-specific animal welfare requirements. On the latter, basically, you saw that now we have vertical directives only for some species, not all. We have a mandate for dairy cows, so this could be some. There could be some new requirements for dairy cows, but there are other species, I don't know, turkeys, etc. And on this, the idea that is mentioned in the inception impact assessment is that there could be some elements in the legislative proposal and some empowerment. So what we call empowerments means that the legislation foresees the possibility for the Commission at a later stage to develop more specific requirements in certain cases. It's all framed in a legislation, but this would allow basically to develop requirements for other species once we have the necessary scientific evidence, and we have shared with, agreed with EFSA on an intention to send additional mandates in the future after 2023, having in mind that we could have such a system of empowerment for new species-specific requirements at a later stage. So this would be like a stepwise approach in terms of the specific requirements for those species not yet covered. Now, animal welfare labeling, the inception impact assessment is quite simple. It mentions 4 options, status quo, so no specific EU legislation on animal welfare labeling, only some aspects, let's say, in the marketing standards as regards eggs. Then option 1, to have a framework regulating animal welfare claims. This exists in the area of nutrition, and we could imagine something similar for animal welfare. Option 2, to have an EU animal welfare label, but that would be limited to the cage, non-cage systems issue. As you saw, the Citizens Initiative will be a major part of our revision. So this could be the focus on the EU animal welfare label. Or option 3, to have an EU animal welfare label that is more comprehensive and looks at key welfare criteria and gives a, let's say, a more comprehensive picture to the consumer. So this is also this will also be part of the impact assessment and to form a basis for a possible legislative proposal. Now, this is some elements related to transport that are ongoing around this major project, but that are relevant for you, I think. The European Parliament has set up a committee of inquiry on animal transport, and they have worked for, I think, more than 1 year with many meetings, some on-the-spot visits, etc. They have basically delivered 2 documents, a report and a recommendation. These are on the agenda of the plenary meeting of the European Parliament this week. So this Thursday, actually, there will be a debate and a vote on this. And in the recommendation, it's quite relevant for us because they put forward a series of ideas of what the Commission proposal could foresee in the area of transport. So it's of course something we have followed closely. For its recommendation, there is nothing binding in this document, but it's at least very important for us to know what is the views of the Parliament on this issue, because it will be the first time that this legislative proposal in the area of animal welfare will be subject to co-decision, meaning that the European Parliament and the Council will have to agree in the end. Before, in the last legislative process on animal welfare, it was not yet a co-decision process. It was not yet under the Lisbon Treaty, so it was the Council mainly. So this will change the dynamic this time, clearly, and therefore it's important to have in mind what the Parliament expects or wishes in these different areas. Also, for your information, the Commission is doing a study on the transport of unweaned calves. We are also preparing some legislation, what we call tertiary legislation. So it's not a legislative proposal. So an implementing act and a delegated act on official control aspects for the transport of live animals by livestock vessels. Basically to try to give more tools for the member states to have better enforcement, because enforcement of the legislation remains a major issue. And also because enforcement is a major issue, we will, our colleagues in Grange will do a new series of audits in the area of sea transport and in the area of transport of unweaned calves. So these are foreseen in 2022. To conclude, I think, my last slide with the roadmap of future mandates to EFSA that I mentioned earlier. So you see here the list of species which are currently not covered by detailed EU requirements, EU welfare requirements, and for which we could we have in mind to send mandates to EFSA in the future. In the case that we have indeed in this revised EU legislation some empowerments to lay down specific requirements based on the delegated act. So you have the list here, it's on our website. Yes, and I have another slide because this issue is clearly of importance to you, because there were some, I wanted to basically summarize what I guess are the main issues for the breeding sector. So first, in our discussions, we have the option to extend certain welfare requirements to breeding stocks. because as you probably know, let's say the relevant directives have some derogations at the moment, and therefore this question is part of the mandate to EFSA. As I mentioned, the phasing of cages that we discussed, that is also covering yes, the breeding stage. And then another issue which was raised more recently, it was actually raised by Denmark in the Council of Ministers of Agriculture in December, so very recent. They basically raised a question based on a study which was showing that there is a high frequency of keel bone fractures in laying hens, and that this could be the result of breeding strategies due to the fact that these strategies are aiming at small hens with high egg productions and an early start of lay and big eggs. So these keel bone fractures could be the result of these strategies. And based on this, Denmark was calling to include breeding issues more in general, not only in the case of laying hens, in the revision of the EU welfare legislation. So there was a discussion on this. And basically, if I summarize very briefly, I think all ministers and the commissioner said that this is important, this issue is important, needs to be looked at, but at the same time recognize that there is a number of unknown and further research and data needed. Voilà, this is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much. We are of course here to reply to your questions.